My wife stumbled through the front door at exactly 4:04 in the morning. I knew the time because I had been staring at the clock for nearly 3 hours, listening to every car that passed our house and wondering where she was. Her hair was messy, one heel was missing, and her hands were trembling as she struggled to close the door behind her. I sat on the edge of the couch without saying a word. She looked at me for half a second, then quickly looked away. "Don't ask," she whispered. Those 2 words should have made me angry. Instead, something about the fear in her voice made my stomach tighten. I simply nodded. "Okay." She walked toward the hallway, but before she disappeared, she turned around and stared at me like she wanted to tell me something. Then she swallowed hard and said, "Please, just trust me." I wish I could say I trusted her completely that night, but I didn't. My wife, Emily, had never come home that late during our 12 years of marriage. We had arguments, disagreements, and the occasional silent dinner. But disappearing until 4 in the morning was completely unlike her. I wanted to ask where she had been. I wanted to know why she was shaking, and why her perfume smelled faintly like smoke. Most of all, I wanted to know why she looked terrified instead of guilty. But I remembered her words. "Don't ask." So I stayed silent. She went upstairs, and I heard the bathroom door close. A few minutes later, I heard water running. Then everything became quiet again. I remained on the couch until sunrise, replaying one question in my mind. What could possibly make my wife come home looking like she had just survived something she was afraid to tell me about? Around 7 in the morning, I finally went upstairs to make coffee. Emily was still asleep. At least, I thought she was. Her bedroom door was slightly open, and I could see her sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone. She looked exhausted. When she noticed me, she immediately locked the screen. "Morning," she said softly. I didn't respond right away. I simply looked at her. There were dark circles beneath her eyes, and her face looked pale. "Are you okay?" I finally asked. She nodded too quickly. "I'm fine." That answer felt rehearsed. I walked downstairs without pushing her. 20 minutes later, someone knocked on our front door. When I opened it, I froze. Emily's mother, Linda, stood there with tears streaming down her face. She looked at me and whispered, "Is Emily here?" Before I could answer, she stepped inside. Linda had always been warm toward me. She treated me like a son, and I had never seen her cry before. But that morning she looked broken. She walked into the living room, sat down, and covered her face with both hands. "What happened?" I asked. She shook her head. "I don't know how to tell you." My heart began beating faster. I suddenly remembered Emily's terrified expression from the night before. "Does this have something to do with Emily?" I asked. Linda looked directly at me. "Yes." Then she started crying harder. I sat beside her, completely confused. "Linda, please, tell me what happened." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. Her hand was shaking so badly that she almost dropped it. "Your wife doesn't know I'm here," she said, "and she doesn't know what I found out last night." I stared at the envelope. "What did you find out?" Before Linda could answer, we heard footsteps coming down the stairs. Emily entered the living room wearing the same clothes she had worn the night before. The moment she saw her mother sitting beside me, everything changed. Her face went completely white. She stopped walking. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then Emily whispered, "Mom, what are you doing here?" Linda stood up slowly. "I came because you wouldn't tell him." Emily looked at me. I could see fear in her eyes. "Tell me what?" I asked. Emily's lips trembled. "It's not what you think." I almost laughed because that was exactly what people said when something was very wrong. "Then tell me what it is." Emily looked at her mother, and Linda opened the envelope. Inside was a photograph. Linda placed it on the coffee table. I picked it up. It showed Emily standing outside a hotel at nearly midnight. But she wasn't alone. The man beside her was someone I recognized immediately. His name was Daniel, a man from Emily's office. I had met him twice at company events. He was married, friendly, and completely forgettable. Seeing him in that photograph made something inside me collapse. Emily stepped forward. "Please, let me explain." I looked at the picture again. Daniel was standing close to her, and Emily appeared to be crying. It wasn't the romantic scene I had feared, but it was suspicious enough to destroy every comfortable assumption I had made. Why were you at a hotel with him at midnight? I asked. Emily closed her eyes. Because I was trying to help him. I stared at her. Help him do what? She didn't answer. Linda did. Daniel's wife found messages between him and Emily. My chest tightened. Messages. Linda nodded. But they weren't what everyone thought they were. She reached into her purse again and pulled out printed screenshots. Read them before you decide what your wife has done. I took the papers with shaking hands. The messages were between Emily and Daniel, but they weren't romantic. They were about money, meetings, and something called the account. One message from Daniel said, "If she finds out, everything is over." Another said, "Emily, please don't tell anyone yet." My confusion became worse. "What is this?" I asked. Emily finally sat down. Tears rolled down her cheeks. 3 months ago, Daniel discovered that someone at our company was stealing money from a client account. She explained that the amount was enormous, and Daniel had secretly started investigating because he feared the company would blame him. Emily accidentally became involved after noticing suspicious transactions in files she handled. "Then why didn't you tell me?" I asked. She looked down. "Because someone threatened me." The room went silent. Linda whispered, "That's why she came home at 4. Emily told us that the previous night she had agreed to meet Daniel because he had found evidence identifying the person behind the theft. They met at a hotel because Daniel believed his phone and office were being monitored. But before they could exchange everything, someone followed them. They escaped through a back entrance, separated, and Emily spent hours driving around because she was terrified someone was watching our house. "I wanted to call you," she said, "but I was afraid they would find out who you were." I didn't know what to say. Part of me felt relief. Another part felt furious that she had hidden something so serious from me. Then Linda interrupted. "There's more." She handed me another photograph. This one showed Daniel's car parked outside our house 2 weeks earlier. "He wasn't the only person watching Emily," she said. "Someone had been following both of you." I looked at Emily, and suddenly the strange details of the past few weeks began making sense. She had stopped taking her usual route to work. She checked the windows before going to bed. She had become nervous whenever an unknown car parked near our street. I had assumed she was stressed. I never imagined she was afraid. But there was one question I still couldn't escape. "Why did you tell me not to ask?" I asked. Emily wiped her tears. "Because when I came home last night, I knew someone had followed me." She explained that she had seen the same black SUV 3 times. She didn't know whether it belonged to the people threatening Daniel or someone else. She believed that if she told me everything immediately, I might confront someone or make a mistake that could put us both in danger. "So you decided to carry this alone?" I asked. She nodded. "I thought protecting you meant keeping you out of it." Her answer hurt because I realized she had been trying to protect our marriage in the worst possible way, by shutting me out. Then Linda revealed the part that none of us expected. She had discovered everything because Emily had secretly asked her to keep a backup copy of the evidence. Linda had found the envelope in an old storage box at her house and realized the situation was much more serious than Emily had admitted. She had spent the previous night trying to reach Emily, but Emily's phone had been switched off. That was why Linda came to our house that morning. She wasn't there to accuse Emily. She was there because she feared her daughter might be in danger. "I couldn't sit at home anymore," Linda said. "I needed someone else to know the truth." I looked at the photograph again. The man standing beside Emily no longer looked like a lover. He looked like another frightened person trapped inside the same nightmare. Still, one question remained unanswered. Who had been following them? My phone suddenly vibrated on the coffee table. Everyone went silent. The screen showed an unknown number. A message appeared. "You should have stayed out of this." Emily's face lost all color. Linda grabbed her daughter's hand. I stared at the message, and for the first time, I understood why Emily had been so afraid. Someone knew we were talking. Someone knew about the evidence. And someone wanted us scared enough to stop looking. I didn't reply. Instead, I photographed the message and called the police. Within an hour, investigators arrived at our house. They examined the photographs, the messages, and the evidence Daniel had collected. They also discovered something disturbing. The black SUV had been captured on a neighbor's security camera several times. The person behind the threats wasn't a stranger. It was someone connected to Emily's company. By the end of the investigation, the truth finally came out. A senior manager had been stealing money through fake accounts and using employees' information to hide the transactions. Daniel had discovered the scheme, and Emily had unknowingly noticed enough irregularities to become a threat. The manager had threatened Daniel, then started intimidating Emily. The hotel meeting had been their attempt to gather evidence before going to the authorities. The black SUV belonged to a private investigator hired by the manager to scare them into silence. When the evidence was presented, the manager was arrested, Daniel was cleared, and Emily's company began a full investigation. But none of that erased what had happened inside our marriage. For weeks, my wife had been carrying fear alone while I had been sitting beside her. Completely unaware, we survived the danger, but something between us had changed. That evening, Emily and I sat together on the porch. For the first time since she came home at 4:04 in the morning, there were no secrets between us. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I looked at her and said, "I understand why you were afraid, but I don't want you protecting me by keeping me in the dark." She nodded through her tears. Linda eventually came outside and hugged both of us. I realized then why seeing her mother cry beside me that morning had frightened Emily so much. She knew the truth was finally coming out, and she was terrified that I would believe the worst before hearing the whole story. I had almost made that mistake. One photograph had nearly convinced me that my wife had betrayed me, but the truth was far more complicated. Sometimes the most frightening secret in a marriage isn't an affair. Sometimes it's a danger one person is silently carrying because they are afraid the truth will destroy everyone they love.